The hardest thing to do in super sleuths, and the most important thing to figure out, is the white powders, the powder evidence that's in your test kit. And that's what's really going to help you figure out who did the crime and who the culprit is. And so you have a whole list in your rules for Science Olympiad on what possible powders that you could use for super sleuths. Most of them are things that many of you have in your cupboards, things like baking soda and confectioner's sugar, maybe leftover from the holidays when you were cooking, maybe cornstarch, flour, and sugar. Some of them are a little bit harder to come by. Sodium acetate is something that a lot of people don't always have, that can be ordered. This is washing soda, which is different than baking soda, and that you can find at most grocery stores or in Walmart. It's in the cleaning section. So before you start anything, you need an adult and an adult's permission to be able to work. Even though these are things that you might have around your house, they are still chemicals, and you should work with an adult on this. This is a great project to do with the family. It's cold outside, and it's something you can work on together. You should also protect your eyes. Okay, a pair of goggles to help you. And you need a couple of chemicals. You need rubbing alcohol, you need vinegar, you need some water, and it's better to not be tap water. So if you can, go to the store and get distilled water, or use your refrigerator filter at least, or even a bottle of water would be better than your tap water, because your tap water will have a different pH, which is important. And pH paper. This is something that you can find. pH paper is something that you can buy at the store. You can buy it online in lots of places. It's usually in the garden section. People take the pH of their soil to help them figure out if they should add an acid or a base to help get their grass and their plants to grow better. pH paper is fantastic to play with. Everyone should have some pH paper in their house, because there's so many things you can test around your house. It comes in long strips, and you don't need a long strip in order to test things. So I've cut all of mine. I just ripped mine into smaller pieces so that I would have more pieces to play with. And one of the first things you should do when you get pH paper is to put a couple of things in water or test different liquids, and then compare it to this chart that's on the outside of a pH paper container. If it is a low number, if the color matches a low number, that means it's acidic. And if it matches a high number, then that means it's basic. And that helps us a lot when it comes to determining what the chemicals are that we're using. And both high pHs and low pHs can do different things. Lots of times our soaps and our cleaners have a high pH or basic that helps to break down greases and help to clean things better. Something like lemon juice will have a high pH. So does orange juice. Vinegar has a high pH, so you can test all of those things. So I'm using a spot plate for this, but you can use anything you have around your house that's small. You do not want a big bowl to do this, because chemistry and testing these things can be done on very, very small scale. So it might be empty plastic containers. This is like from some oranges that were in a lunch, some little bowls that maybe you have, or little cups. You can use plastic cups. You don't have to have this spot plate that I'm showing you. Also, you need something to be able to drop some water or the vinegar or the alcohol into your chemicals. If you have pipettes at home from a chemistry set or a science experiment that maybe you've done, great, but you don't need that either. One of the things that I think works really great, this is an old medicine dropper from when my kids took medicine that was liquid, and we still had that, and it works great as a syringe to just pull up some water and let me be able to test what I need to test. Probably the hardest thing to find, if you don't already have some in your house, is iodine. So if you go to a drugstore like a Walgreens or a CVS, you can buy what's called iodine tincture, and that will work for this. This is a chemical. It stains, for one thing, and if you're allergic to shellfish, you're probably allergic to this. So this is definitely something that you want to make sure you have a grown-up involved in when you're doing this. If you don't have that in your house, it's okay. You can always use the internet to figure out how these different chemicals respond to iodine. So when you have, when one of our white powders has a starch in it. When you put iodine on it, it will turn a bluish black color. And otherwise it doesn't turn a color, it just stays brown. And that's one of our tests. You should download and probably print out the chart that has that's on our Super Sleuths page, that has all of the possible chemicals for this year, all of our powders that might be in on the crime scene, and then start to fill out the information about it and do the best you can with the resources that you have, either at school or at home. And then you can Google all of these things. You can search them on the internet and you can see, does flour react with vinegar? Okay, so Super Sleuths becomes a thing where you've got to spend your time wisely, because you only have a certain amount of time to figure out all the different chemicals, and then why does that suspect have this? And so it takes some time. So the faster that you can logically get through your powders, the more time you have to kind of analyze the rest of the crime scene. So one thing to do is to make it, after you've done these experiments with and filled in your chart, is to kind of make a flow chart and maybe put things in different categories, because only certain things are going to react to iodine. So then if you know that it turns blue when you add iodine to it, then that should be a very small list of other, and you can look at that list and say, okay, because it turned blue, then it has to be this or this or this, and now I can do a different test. And that allows you to kind of spend your time the way you need to in order to show, to get through the test and be able to answer all the questions that come at the end. So I'm going to show you how we can narrow down some things as we go. So here's a great example how one test can help eliminate a lot of different chemicals that are on your list. We have sodium carbonate over here, which is washing soda, sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda. I happen to buy ones that are made by Arm & Hammer, but you don't have to have this name brand to do this, just what I have in my house. And they are the only two things on your list that are gonna react with vinegar. So I've got some vinegar here, and if I put some vinegar in these two spots, oh, we're gonna see some bubbles. I want the bubbles, okay? So if we see bubbles with vinegar, we can narrow it down to just these two chemicals right away, sodium carbonate or sodium bicarbonate. But then we have to figure out which one it is. Well, if you look closely, they do look different. Sodium carbonate is on the right, and it is kind of, I don't know, I would say granular. It has bigger pieces. Sodium bicarbonate is very powdery, but then maybe you can't see that well in the picture, or you kind of don't have that piece written down. So then the other thing we can do is take the pH of these. So if I add some water to both. So if you can't take the pH of a solid, and you have to take the pH of a liquid. So by adding some distilled water, that's going to help dissolve some of that in the water, and that will help us get the pH. Okay, so then if I start over here with the sodium bicarbonate, the sodium carbonate here on the right, you see that one turns a blue. The sodium bicarbonate, the baking soda here on the left, it turns green. So the pH of baking soda, of sodium bicarbonate, it's more like an 8, and the pH of sodium carbonate, the washing soda, is more like a 10 to an 11. So there's another great test. So you can see we can narrow down that list really quickly. Okay, first it bubbled when I put vinegar in it. Okay, it can only be two things. And then from there I can look at it and I can take the pH of it. And from there I should be able to know exactly which one is which. I also want to show you how you can narrow down your list based on how this reacts with iodine. So now I've got baking soda on the left and I've got cornstarch on the right. As we look down here, and they're, again, these powders look a lot alike when you kind of start, and cornstarch is a little powdery. If you were in person with this and we weren't doing this online for Science Olympiad this year, you might be able to look at that and know right away. But one great test is to put some iodine in there. Okay. You can see that when you add iodine to baking soda, it stays this brown color. That's kind of what comes out of the container. But when you put it in cornstarch, it turns a very deep kind of purple-black color. And that lets you know there's starch in it. And if you look across your list, there's only a couple of your powders that are going to turn that black color. And that should be a list as well, so that you narrow it down and you know, okay, if it turned black, one of my possibilities is cornstarch. You have to go down your list and see which other ones might be a possibility. And then you can narrow down your list quickly to do a few other tests and know how it might react.